AITA for refusing to let my dying mother meet my child? I'm Jessica, 30F, a mom to a sweet 2-year-old. My mother was cruel throughout my childhood, emotionally neglectful, verbally abusive, and manipulative. Years of therapy helped me break the cycle and build a peaceful life with my loving husband and son. When my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she begged to meet my child. Relatives pressured me, calling me heartless, but I chose to protect my son from her toxicity. Despite guilt and backlash, I stood firm. My mother passed without meeting him. I feel peace, knowing I kept my promise to break the cycle. Sometimes love means choosing protection over obligation. Jessica, and I'm a 32-year-old woman from Oregon. I've gone back and forth so many times on whether I should even share the story. It's personal, raw, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure it paints me in the best light. But I've seen how people here listen without judgment, or at least with empathy, and I feel like maybe, just maybe, sharing this will help me process everything I've been feeling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. It always blows my mind how far these stories travel. Right now, as I sit in my small but cozy living room typing this out, my 2-year-old son is napping in his room. His soft breathing through the baby monitor is the only sound filling the house. My husband, Eric, is at work, but he'll be home soon. He's one of those partners you dream of having. You know the type, steady, kind, always knowing the right thing to say, or when to just sit quietly with you while you're lost in your thoughts. We live what most people would probably call a peaceful life. Our house isn't huge, but it's ours. It's filled with warmth, photos of our wedding, our son's milestones, little scribbles that pass for art and proudly hang on our fridge. My days are a mix of working remotely as a graphic designer and chasing around a toddler who thinks the world is his playground. It's tiring, sure, but in that good, satisfying way where at the end of the day, you feel like your heart is full even if your feet ache. I worked really hard to build this life. And I don't just mean the job, the house, the stability. I mean the peace, the quiet inside my head, the absence of that constant gnawing anxiety that used to be my shadow. That took years. Therapy, reflection, boundaries, so many boundaries. And all of it led me here, to this version of myself who can breathe without feeling like I'm stealing air from someone else. Which brings me to why I'm here, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. A week ago, I got a phone call. It was from my aunt, someone I haven't spoken to in probably 4 or 5 years. Just seeing her name pop up on my phone sent this jolt of unease through my body. I let it go to voicemail at first, but the curiosity, or maybe the dread, got the better of me. I listened to her message. Her voice sounded older, tired. She said she had news about my mother. My mother, who I haven't spoken to in nearly a decade. My mother, who I thought I had finally managed to tuck away in some corner of my mind where she couldn't reach me anymore. I called my aunt back. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me my mother is dying. Late-stage cancer. The kind where there are no more treatments left to try, no more doctors left to see. Just time and not much of it. And she said the words I had been bracing for without realizing it. She wants to see you, Jess. She wants to meet her grandson before it's too late. I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. Shock, sure. But also this flood of memories I thought I'd buried for good. The sound of my mother's voice, sharp and cold. The sting of her words. The weight of never being good enough, no matter how hard I tried. I felt like that little girl again. Small, invisible, desperate for love and always left wanting. And now, here she was, at the end of her life, asking for something from me. Something I'm not sure I can give. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours after that call, just staring at nothing. Eric came home, found me like that, and immediately knew something was wrong. I told him everything, every detail of the call, every ugly thought running through my head. And as always, he listened. He didn't push me toward a decision. He didn't tell me what I should do. He just held my hand and said, "Whatever you choose, I'm with you. But here's the thing. I don't know what to choose. On one hand, I feel like maybe I owe her this. Not because she deserves it, because honestly, she doesn't, but because I don't want to carry the weight of regret. What if I say no, and then years from now I look at my son and wonder if I did the right thing? What if I let my bitterness and anger rob him of the chance to know his grandmother, even if only for a moment? On the other hand, the idea of letting her near my child makes my skin crawl. I worked so hard to build a safe, loving world for him. I vowed, the day he was born, that he would never feel the kind of hurt I felt growing up. Letting her in, even for a second, feels like inviting a storm into the calm. Like opening a door I slammed shut for my own survival. And there's fear too. Fear that she'll say something that will stay with my son forever, even if he's too young now to understand it. Fear that seeing her again will undo the years of healing I fought so hard for. Fear that I'll crumble under the weight of old wounds reopened. The messages have started coming in from other relatives now. Cousins, distant aunts, people I haven't heard from in years, suddenly reminding me that she's still your mother, and you'll regret it if you don't give her this. As if I haven't spent years already regretting the things I did do to try to win her love. As if I owe her anything. And then there's the guilt. Oh, the guilt. Because I'm human. And because no matter how much someone hurts you, no matter how justified you feel in cutting them out, there's always that little voice whispering, what if you're wrong? What if you're the bad guy here? I've been up most nights since that call, watching my son sleep, tracing the curve of his cheek, the softness of his curls. Wondering what kind of mother I am. Wondering what kind of daughter I am. Wondering if I can be both at the same time. I know people will have opinions. I know some will think I'm heartless for keeping my child from a dying woman. Others will understand why I'm so hesitant. That's part of why I'm sharing this. Not because I expect anyone to tell me what to do, but because I want to know if anyone else has stood where I'm standing right now. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your peace and doing what others think is the right thing? Have you ever been so torn between the past and the future that the present feels unbearable? I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe by the time I finish telling this whole story, I'll have made a choice. Maybe not. But thank you for being here, for listening. Even just writing this has helped me breathe a little easier. If you've ever had to make a choice like this, or if you're struggling with your own complicated family story, just know you're not alone. And remember, I'm reading every comment. So please, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I don't know why, but seeing those messages always makes me feel like we're all sitting in the same room, just talking through the hard stuff together. My earliest memories of my mother aren't soft or comforting the way I imagine they should be. There's no warm embrace, no scent of cookies baking, no gentle lullabies to soothe me to sleep. Instead, when I close my eyes and think back to those early years, I hear sharp words. I see cold eyes. I feel the crushing weight of never being enough. That was the backdrop of my childhood, a constant storm of disapproval and disappointment, no matter how hard I tried to earn even a sliver of affection. From as far back as I can remember, my mother made it clear that I was, in her eyes, a mistake. I was the child who cried too much, who asked too many questions, who took up too much space. She would tell me so, in so many words. When I was as young as 5 or 6, I remember standing in the kitchen one afternoon, proudly holding up a picture I'd drawn at school. It was a family portrait, stick figures and all, and I had spent so much time on it, trying to get the colors right, making sure everyone had a smile. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to be proud of me. She barely glanced at it before saying, "Jessica, don't be ridiculous. Go do something useful instead of wasting time on silly drawings." That was my first lesson in what to expect from her. No praise, no encouragement, just criticism, sharp and swift. I learned early that bringing home good grades wasn't something to be celebrated. It was expected. And if I slipped, if I got a B instead of an A, the disappointment was palpable. "Maybe if you weren't always daydreaming, you'd have done better," she'd say, her voice laced with that bitter edge that made me shrink inside. The verbal barbs didn't stop at schoolwork. My looks, my friends, my interests, all fair game for her scorn. I was too plain, too awkward, too loud, too quiet. Whatever I was, it wasn't right. I remember standing in front of the mirror once when I was around 10, trying to smooth my hair, wishing I looked more like the girls on TV. She walked past and sneered, "You can't polish what isn't there, Jessica." That stuck with me. It burrowed so deep that, even now as a grown woman, I sometimes hear her voice when I catch my reflection unexpectedly. And while she was tearing me down, she was lifting my brother up like he was the sun itself. Everything he did was perfect. Every small achievement of his was celebrated, photographed, bragged about to anyone who would listen. When he brought home a B on a test, it was because the teacher was unfair. When I brought home a B, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough. When he forgot his chores, she'd laugh it off. When I did, she'd lecture me for hours about responsibility. I stopped trying to compete for her approval because I knew the game was rigged. I was the scapegoat, the problem child. Looking back, I see how that favoritism wasn't just unfair, it was deliberate. She wanted me to see that I would never measure up, not in her eyes. And as much as it hurt, part of me wanted to keep trying, because what child doesn't want their mother's love? I thought if I was just better, smarter, quieter, more helpful, maybe she'd change. Maybe she'd look at me the way she looked at him. But it never came. And it wasn't just what she said that left scars. It was what she didn't say. The silence in moments when I needed her most. The times I came home crying because a kid at school had teased me, and instead of comforting me, she told me to toughen up. The times I was sick and she dismissed it as me being dramatic. There was a day in 7th grade when I fainted at school from a stomach bug that had been getting worse and worse. They called her to come get me, but when she showed up, she was furious. Not worried, furious. In the car, she hissed, "How dare you embarrass me like that, Jessica? People will think I don't take care of you." One of the worst moments I can remember happened during my high school years. I was 15, awkward, shy, and desperate to fit in somewhere. I had spent weeks preparing for a school talent show. I wasn't much of a singer, but I worked up the courage to perform a song I'd written myself. It felt like a big step for me, like maybe I was finding my voice in a world that constantly told me to shut up. I begged her to come. I imagined her sitting in the audience, maybe even smiling, maybe even clapping at the end. But she didn't show. I saw the empty seat where she was supposed to be, and I felt that familiar hollow ache settle in my chest. Later, when I got home, still hoping for some crumb of validation, she barely looked up from her magazine. "You shouldn't waste your time on silly things like that," she said. "No one wants to hear you sing anyway." There were times when the cruelty crossed over into psychological warfare. If I ever pushed back, if I ever tried to set a boundary or express how hurt I was, she would turn it around on me. I was ungrateful. I was sensitive. I was making her the villain when she had sacrificed so much for me. She'd remind me of the roof over my head, the clothes on my back, as if basic parenting was some extraordinary favor she was doing me. And then she'd ice me out, sometimes for days. No words, no acknowledgement that I existed. The silent treatment became her most powerful weapon. It left me tiptoeing around my own home, desperate to get back in her good graces, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. There were threats too, not of violence, but of abandonment. Whenever I cried or begged for understanding, she threatened to send me to live with some distant relative, or to a boarding school she claimed was for difficult kids. I lived in constant fear that one day I'd come home and find my bags packed. That fear kept me small. It kept me silent. One incident that still haunts me happened when I was 17. I'd applied to a summer program for young writers, something I'd dreamed of for years. I wrote my essay late at night, pouring my heart into it, because writing was the one thing that felt like mine. When I got in, I was over the moon. I ran to tell her, expecting, hoping, for a rare moment of pride. Instead, she laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "What? You think you're going to be some big-shot writer? Don't be ridiculous. You'll quit like you always do." And just like that, the joy drained out of me. I turned down the spot. I told my teacher I couldn't go because of family obligations, but the truth was, I couldn't stand the idea of going without her support. I couldn't bear to hear her mocking me for chasing something that made me happy. There are so many moments like that. Times when she failed to protect me, or worse, when she was the one I needed protection from. Times when I needed a mother and got a critic instead. Times when I should have felt safe but felt small, unwanted, invisible. People talk about their childhoods like they were golden, like they were filled with laughter and love. I envy that. My childhood felt like walking on glass barefoot every day. I never knew which step would cut me, but I knew it was coming. I've spent years trying to heal from that. Therapy has helped. Building a life where I am loved, where I am safe, where my voice matters, that's helped too. But the scars are still there. They're quieter now, but they're part of me. They remind me why I set the boundaries I did, why I chose peace, why I've kept my distance. And now, with my mother reaching out from what might be her deathbed, asking for something she never gave me, compassion, forgiveness, connection, I'm left wondering how much of the past I'm willing to reopen, and whether I can do that without losing myself all over again. If I had to point to one single moment where everything finally snapped, where the fragile thread tethering me to my mother frayed beyond repair, it was the night before my wedding. That was the moment she crossed a boundary so deep, so final, that even now, thinking about it brings back the tightness in my chest and that deep, hollow ache of betrayal. For years leading up to that night, I had done what so many people with mothers like mine do. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to find a balance between having her in my life and protecting myself from the worst of her cruelty. I learned to smile through her backhanded compliments. I learned to change the subject when she started in on her criticism. I learned to let the barbs slide off me, or at least I pretended they did. But deep down, every comment, every dig, every moment of indifference sank into me like a stone thrown into a still pond, sending out ripples I couldn't control. When Eric and I got engaged, I told myself it would be different. I wanted it to be different. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, the fresh start I'd been dreaming of. I was building something beautiful, something safe. And even though every instinct told me to keep her at arm's length, I let her in. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd rise to the occasion. Maybe this would be the thing that softened her, that made her see me as someone worth loving, worth supporting. At first, she played along. She smiled at the right times. She offered to help plan. She even seemed excited in her way. But I should have known better. Beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming. She criticized every decision I made. The venue was too tacky. The dress I chose made me look frumpy. The menu wasn't good enough. The guest list wasn't right. Every step of the way, it was as if she was trying to remind me that nothing I did could ever measure up. Still, I pushed through. I wanted the day to be about love, about starting fresh. I convinced myself that if I could just get through it, I could keep her toxicity from touching this new chapter of my life. But the night before the wedding, everything crumbled. We were at the rehearsal dinner, a small, intimate gathering of close family and friends. There was laughter, clinking glasses, little toasts here and there. Eric's mom hugged me and said how lucky she felt to be gaining a daughter. My dad, who'd always been quiet in the background of my life, gave me a look that said how proud he was of me. For a few hours, it felt like everything I'd hoped for was within reach. And then she shattered it. It started small, like it always did. A comment here, a snide remark there. She cornered me in the hallway of the restaurant, away from the others. I can still see her face, tight with that familiar mix of contempt and false concern. "You're making a mistake, Jessica," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You think Eric really loves you? You're not good enough for him. Everyone sees it, even if they're too polite to say it." I stared at her, willing myself not to cry. I'd heard this kind of thing before, but hearing it on that night, the night before I was supposed to start my life with the man I loved, it broke something inside me. I tried to walk away, but she wasn't done. She followed me back to the table, sat down like nothing happened, and over the course of the next half hour, managed to humiliate me in front of Eric's family. She brought up old boyfriends, implied I'd been desperate for attention, made little digs at my weight, my job, even the way I laughed. And she did it all with that smile that made it seem like she was joking, like I was the one being too sensitive. The final blow came when she took it upon herself to pull Eric aside. I didn't hear exactly what she said. He wouldn't tell me everything, but I know enough. She tried to plant seeds of doubt, tried to convince him that I wasn't who he thought I was, that I wasn't ready for marriage, that I'd hurt him the way I'd always hurt people who care about me. Eric came back to me with this look of heartbreak and fury on his face. Not at me, at her. And that's when I knew. I knew I couldn't do it anymore. That night, after the dinner ended and we were alone, I broke down completely. The dam I'd held up for so many years gave way. I sobbed in Eric's arms, all the hurt and rage and exhaustion pouring out of me. I told him everything, not just about that night, but about all the nights and days that came before. All the little cruelties, all the moments she made me feel small, worthless, unlovable. And I made a decision. I decided she wouldn't be at the wedding. The one boundary I'd been too afraid to set, I set it then. I called her that night and told her not to come. She screamed at me, of course, called me ungrateful, selfish, cruel, told me I was proving her right, that I was just as awful as she'd always said. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. I knew that if I let her be there, she'd find a way to ruin it. And I couldn't let that happen. Not to me, not to Eric, not to this new beginning. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Some of my relatives understood, quietly, in private messages and phone calls. They told me they were proud of me, that they'd seen how she treated me and wondered how I put up with it as long as I did. But others made it clear where their loyalty lay. I got emails, voicemails, messages telling me I was heartless, that I'd broken my mother's heart on what should have been a joyful occasion. Some relatives cut contact entirely, as if I'd committed some unthinkable sin by standing up for myself. For a while, I questioned myself. In the quiet moments after the wedding, which was beautiful, by the way, filled with love and joy and exactly the peace I'd hoped for, I wondered if I'd done the right thing. If I'd gone too far. If I'd become the villain in my own story. But deep down I knew. I knew I'd finally done what I should have done years ago. I'd protected myself. And I went no contact after that. Completely. Fully, finally. I changed my number. Blocked her on social media. Stopped responding to the flying monkeys who tried to guilt me into letting her back in. I carved out a space where her voice couldn't reach me anymore. It wasn't easy. My mental health, already frayed from years of emotional warfare, took time to recover. I had nightmares at first, dreams where she found me, where she burst into my life again, where I was trapped under the weight of her judgment. But slowly they faded. Slowly I found my footing. Slowly, I built a world where I didn't have to flinch every time the phone rang or wonder if the next family gathering would end in tears. The decision to go no contact wasn't just about that one night. It was about every night that came before. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying enough. And even now, with her reaching out from the edge of her life, asking for something she never gave me, kindness, forgiveness, connection, I have to wonder if crossing that line again would undo all the healing I've fought so hard for. That was the breaking point. That was the night I chose myself. And for all the guilt, all the fallout, all the pain that came with it, I don't regret it. Not for a second. After I cut contact with my mother, I imagined I'd feel immediate relief. I thought the weight of years of cruelty, manipulation, and disappointment would lift from my chest like a heavy stone finally rolled away. And in some ways it did. There was a certain quiet that settled over my life in those first few weeks. A quiet that came from no longer bracing myself for the next verbal jab or emotional ambush. But with that quiet came something I hadn't anticipated: emptiness. For so long, even in all her ugliness, my mother had taken up space in my mind and my heart. She had been the constant backdrop to my thoughts, my choices, my self-doubt. Without her voice echoing through my life, I was left with silence. And in that silence, all the buried pain started to surface. I realized, painfully, that cutting her out wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning. I started therapy not long after the wedding. I'd thought about it many times before, but always found reasons to put it off. Money, time, the fear of digging up things I wasn't ready to face. But now, with the break from my mother so fresh, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I remember sitting in the waiting room of that therapist's office, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. I felt like a fraud, like someone who should have been strong enough to handle all this on her own. But I wasn't. And admitting that, walking into that room and saying it out loud, was the first step toward real healing. Those early sessions were brutal. I cried more than I talked. I unpacked memories I tried to lock away, moments I convinced myself didn't matter, but that had shaped the way I saw myself. My therapist helped me see the patterns, the ways I had internalized my mother's cruelty and made it my own. Every time I doubted myself, every time I silenced my needs or second-guessed my worth, it was her voice I was hearing. And slowly, with time and patience, I started to separate that voice from my own. One of the most surprising parts of that process was realizing how much I'd isolated myself over the years. I had friends, sure, but I kept them at arm's length. I'd learned to be cautious, to expect betrayal or disappointment, because that's what my mother had taught me to expect from people who claimed to care. Therapy helped me start letting people in. Really in. I reconnected with old friends I drifted from, opened up more to the ones who'd always been there. I started to trust, little by little. And then, when I least expected it, I met Eric. We met through mutual friends at a small get-together. I wasn't looking for anything serious. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything at all. I was focused on myself, on rebuilding. But from the moment I met him, there was this sense of calm. He wasn't flashy or trying too hard. He was just kind, real. And he saw me, really saw me, in a way I wasn't used to. Eric was patient with me, in ways I hadn't known I needed. He didn't rush me to open up, didn't push me to share parts of myself I wasn't ready to. He let me be. He made space for me, gently encouraging but never demanding. And slowly, I found myself leaning into that space, testing its safety. And it was safe. With him, I could breathe. As we built our life together, I was hyper-aware of my own patterns, my own triggers. I was terrified of becoming my mother, of somehow repeating the cycle, even though I wanted so desperately to break it. There were moments in the early days of our relationship, stupid little arguments about nothing, where I'd hear her in my head, feel that flash of anger or bitterness, and I'd freeze. I'd stop mid-sentence, horrified at the thought that I might be channeling her. Eric always noticed. He'd take my hand, remind me gently that I wasn't her, that I got to choose who I became. When we decided to start a family, that fear came roaring back. I remember holding the positive pregnancy test in my hand and feeling this wild mix of joy and terror. I wanted this baby so much. But along with the excitement came that gnawing fear. What if I failed? What if I didn't know how to be a good mother because I'd never had one? Eric and I talked about it, really talked about it. About my fears, about my hopes, about what kind of parents we wanted to be. And with his support, I made a promise to myself and to our child. I would break the cycle. I would do everything in my power to give our baby the love, security, and acceptance I never had. I would protect their innocence, their sense of worth, their right to feel safe and cherished. That promise became my North Star. It guided me through pregnancy, through those exhausting newborn days, through the sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. Every time I felt overwhelmed or unsure, I reminded myself, I am not my mother. I get to write my own story. I get to give my child a different beginning. When our son was born, I held him in my arms and felt something shift inside me. All the pain, all the hurt, all the scars, they didn't disappear, but they no longer defined me. In that moment, I was simply his mother. Not my mother's daughter, not the girl who never measured up, but a mother determined to do better. I knew from the start that I wouldn't let my mother near him. It wasn't a decision I made lightly or out of spite. It was a decision born of love for my son, for the little boy who deserved a childhood free of the poison that had tainted mine. I thought about what it would mean to let her in, even in a limited way. I imagined the things she might say, the subtle ways she might undermine him, the hurt she might cause without him even understanding where it came from. And I wouldn't risk that. There were moments when I doubted myself, times when the guilt crept in, when I heard the voices of relatives or even strangers whispering that I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. Times when I wondered if I was letting my anger cloud my judgment. But then I'd look at my son, at his bright eyes, his wide, trusting smile, and I'd remember why I made that choice. I wanted to give him the gift of safety, of unconditional love, of knowing, deep in his bones, that he is enough, just as he is. I wanted to spare him the confusion and heartbreak of trying to win the approval of someone who only knows how to tear people down. And I wanted to give that gift to myself, too, to prove to myself that I could do it differently, that I could be the mother I wished I'd had, that I could break free of the shadows of my past and build something new, something better. That journey hasn't been perfect. There have been days when I've lost my temper, when I've felt overwhelmed or unsure. But every day I choose love, I choose kindness, I choose to pause, to reflect, to ask myself what my child needs rather than what my fear is telling me to do. And in doing that, I'm healing parts of myself I didn't even know were still broken. I'm finding peace not just for my son but for me. I'm learning that breaking the cycle doesn't mean erasing the past. It means choosing, day by day, not to let it define the future. Building this new life hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. Every moment of peace, every small victory, every time my son looks at me with pure, unguarded trust, it's worth it. And I hold on to that every time the old wounds ache, every time the past tries to pull me back. I hold on to that, and I keep moving forward. For him, for me, for the life we deserve. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, one of those days where everything felt steady and predictable. I had just put my son down for his nap, the soft hum of the baby monitor filling the quiet in our home. The dishes were stacked in the sink, a half-folded pile of laundry waited on the couch, and for a fleeting moment, I felt that rare sense of calm that motherhood sometimes allows. And then the phone rang, and with it came the storm I thought I had outrun. I didn't recognize the number at first, but something about it, an instinct maybe, or just the heaviness that settled in my chest, told me to answer. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, before finally swiping to pick up. It was my aunt, a voice I hadn't heard in years. Not since the wedding, not since I drew the line that severed the last remaining threads of connection to my mother's world. The sound of her voice was like a ghost pulling me back to a place I didn't want to revisit. "Jessica," she said, and I could hear the weight in her tone immediately. "I know this is the last thing you want to hear from me, but I didn't know who else to call. Your mother's sick, honey. Very sick." The room seemed to shrink around me. My legs felt unsteady, and I sank onto the edge of the couch, gripping the phone as if it might slip from my fingers. "Sick," I managed to whisper, though part of me already knew. "She has cancer. It's advanced. The doctors say, well, they say she doesn't have much time." I don't remember much of what my aunt said after that. The words blurred together. Stage 4, metastasized, no more treatments. I felt numb, like I was watching the moment unfold from somewhere outside my own body. I thanked her for letting me know, promised to think about what she'd said, and hung up the phone. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the baby monitor, listening to the soft, steady rhythm of my son's breathing, so small and perfect, untouched by any of this. I felt the familiar ache of old wounds reopening, like someone had ripped off a bandage I didn't even realize I was still wearing. Then the messages started. At first, they came from my aunt. Gentle at first, almost apologetic. She understood why I'd stayed away, she said. She didn't blame me. But my mother was dying, and wouldn't I want to give her some peace before the end? She talked about closure, about forgiveness, about the chance to say goodbye before it was too late. Then the texts and voicemails started coming from cousins, from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. People who had stayed silent when I needed their support, now suddenly eager to remind me that she's still your mother, and you'll regret it if you don't let her meet her grandchild. And finally, my mother herself found a way to reach me. A letter first, sent through my aunt. The handwriting shaky, unfamiliar in its vulnerability. She wrote about how she'd been reflecting, how she realized the mistake she'd made. She told me she'd changed, that the cancer had given her perspective, made her see the error of her ways. Please, Jessica, the letter said. Please don't let me leave this world without meeting my grandson. I want to make amends. I want to know him, just once. You'll regret it if you don't let this happen. I know you will. Please don't teach him to hate me. Please give me this chance. I read the letter over and over again, each time feeling like I was being pulled under, drowning in a tide of guilt, anger, confusion. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that illness had changed her, softened the edges that had always cut me so deeply. But another part of me, older now, wiser, forged by years of her cruelty, knew better. I knew the patterns. I knew the way she twisted things to suit her narrative. This wasn't about my son. This wasn't even really about me. This was about her, about easing her own conscience, about controlling the story of how her life ended. She wanted to be able to tell herself, to tell others, that in the end, she was forgiven. That she was the mother who made things right. And yet, I couldn't stop the questions from creeping in during the quiet hours of the night. What if I was wrong? What if she truly had changed? What if, by keeping my son from her, I was being as cold and unyielding as she'd always been with me? What if this decision haunted me for the rest of my life? I thought about my son, his chubby hands, his belly laughs, his wide, trusting eyes. I imagined her meeting him, imagined the words she might say, the way she might try to insert herself into his story, to leave a mark that I couldn't erase. The thought made my stomach turn. I remembered all the promises she'd made me over the years, all the time she'd sworn she would do better, be better. And I remembered how every promise was broken, how each one left a deeper scar. Eric was my rock during this time, as he always had been. He listened to me sob, listened to me rage, listened to me fall silent under the weight of it all. He never pushed me toward any decision. He simply reminded me that whatever I chose, it had to be what was right for us, for our family. But the pressure from outside was relentless. Every day brought new messages, new pleas, new guilt trips disguised as concern. I started to dread looking at my phone, dread checking the mail. I felt trapped, cornered by the past and the present colliding in ways I couldn't untangle. The worst of it came one evening when my cousin called me out of the blue. Someone I'd been close to once, before the rift, before the wedding. Her voice was tight with frustration. "Jess, I don't get it," she said. "She's dying. Don't you think it's time to let this go? She's not going to be here much longer. What harm could it do to let her meet him? You'll feel so much better if you just give her this." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that she had no idea what she was asking of me. That this wasn't about a simple visit, a photo op for a dying woman. This was about reopening a door I had slammed shut for my own survival. This was about protecting my son from the very thing that had broken me. But instead, I just hung up. And I cried. In those moments, I felt like that scared little girl again. The one who tiptoed around the house, trying not to make a sound, not to draw attention, not to give her mother another reason to lash out. But this time, I wasn't just that little girl. I was a mother now, too. And that made everything more complicated. Because now, the decisions I made didn't just affect me. They affected the innocent child I'd sworn to protect. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. The fear of making the wrong choice kept me up at night, pacing the floor, staring out at the dark yard beyond our window. I questioned myself in 1,000 different ways. Was I acting out of love or out of bitterness? Was I protecting my son or punishing my mother? The one thing I kept coming back to, over and over, was this. My mother had her chance. She had more chances than I can count. And every time, she chose herself over me. Every time, she showed me who she was. And now, at the end, she was asking for something she'd never been willing to give. I didn't know her this. And yet, the guilt lingered. The doubts lingered. Because no matter how justified I was, no matter how much sense it made to protect my child, I was still human. And that little voice inside, the one that had spent a lifetime trying to win her love, it whispered that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the bad guy after all. I didn't have an answer then. I'm not sure I have one now. But what I do know is this. Every day I look at my son and I remind myself why I made the choices I did. I remind myself of the promises I made. And I hope, I pray, that one day when he's old enough to understand, he'll see that I made those choices out of love. The kind of love that breaks cycles. The kind of love that protects, no matter the cost. There is a point in every difficult decision where the noise of the world grows so loud it drowns out your own voice. In those weeks after my mother's diagnosis became the centerpiece of family gossip and group chats, I felt as if I were standing in the middle of a storm, relatives calling out from every direction, each with their opinion on what I should do, each certain they knew what was best. The guilt came in waves, pushed by their words, their pleas, their judgments. But through it all, beneath the crashing noise, I kept coming back to one quiet, unwavering truth. My first duty was to my son. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake long after Eric and our little boy were asleep, listening to the soft sounds of their breathing, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on my chest like something physical. I thought about what it would mean to say yes, to open the door I had kept shut for so long, to invite her into the safe, sacred space we had built, even if only for a moment. I imagined her holding my son, imagined her eyes filling with tears as she looked at him, imagined her trying to rewrite history with a single gesture. And I imagined what she might say, what little seed she might plant in his mind, even without meaning to, or perhaps meaning to, in that calculating way she always had. I imagined her telling him how cruel I'd been, how heartless I was to keep him from his grandmother. I imagined her subtle jabs disguised as concern, the way she'd done with me so many times. Your mommy is so sensitive, isn't she? Or, you don't have to be scared of me just because your mommy says so. I thought about how small and impressionable he still was. Just 2 years old, his world full of wonder and trust, his heart open and unguarded. Why should he be exposed, even for a moment, to someone who had caused so much harm? What was to be gained? A photo, a memory, a scene designed to ease her conscience, but one that might haunt me for years? It wasn't just about what she might say, either. It was about what it would cost me. The fragile peace I'd fought so hard to build since cutting her out of my life. I could feel it trembling at the very idea of letting her back in. Even if it was only for a single visit, I knew how easily that visit could reopen wounds I'd worked so hard to close. I knew how quickly she could remind me of who I'd been in her presence. Small, uncertain, desperate for approval. I didn't want my son to see me that way. I didn't want him to witness even a moment of that dynamic. And so, slowly, painfully, I came to my decision. I would not let her meet him. Not in person. Not through video chat. Not in any way that would give her access to him or to me. I would send photos if I felt strong enough. I would send updates through my aunt if I could stomach it. But I would not let her into our lives, not even at the end. The backlash was swift and brutal. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years found their voices again, filling my inbox, my voicemail, my social media with messages dripping with judgment. Some couched their criticism in concern. You'll regret this, Jessica. You're letting your bitterness rob your son of a chance to know his grandmother. Others were harsher, heartless, cruel, unforgiving. The words piled up, a chorus of condemnation from people who had stayed silent during my mother's reign of cruelty, but now had endless advice about how I should navigate her dying days. Even some friends struggled to understand. The ones who hadn't witnessed the depth of the damage she had done, who hadn't seen the cost of her presence in my life, wavered. Maybe just one visit, they suggested. For closure, if nothing else. I knew they meant well. I knew they thought they were offering comfort, a way to ease the burden of guilt. But their words only made me feel more isolated, more uncertain, until I reminded myself that they hadn't lived my life. They hadn't grown up with her voice in their ear, tearing them down piece by piece. Eric, as always, was my anchor. I think even he wrestled with it at first, not because he doubted my decision, but because he saw the toll it was taking on me. He saw how I paced the floors at night, how I flinched when the phone rang, how the weight of everyone's expectations threatened to break me. There were moments when I caught the worry in his eyes, when I knew he wished there was a simpler way, a gentler path I could take. But he never pushed, never tried to sway me. He reminded me, gently and often, that I was not responsible for her peace, or for anyone else's approval. I was responsible for our family, for our son, and that became my compass. I thought about the future, about what my son would one day ask me. I imagined him sitting across from me, older, curious about his family, about the grandmother he never met. I pictured myself explaining the choice I'd made, and I knew that I wanted to be able to look him in the eye and say, I chose to protect you. I chose peace over guilt, safety over obligation. I chose what I believed was best for you, even when it was hard. It wasn't an easy choice. It didn't make the guilt vanish or the voices go silent. There are still days when I wonder if I'll look back and wish I'd done differently. But when I watch my son play, when I hear his laughter fill our home, when I see how free he is to simply be, unburdened by the kind of fear and confusion I carried as a child, I feel a sense of peace. I think we all want to believe in redemption stories, especially at the end of a life. We want to believe that people can change, that time and illness can soften even the hardest hearts. Maybe that's true for some. But my mother had her whole life to show me who she was. And she did, over and over again. The decision was mine to make. And I chose protection over performance, love over obligation, peace over the approval of those who would never understand the cost of their advice. I chose to guard the safe, beautiful world we've built for our son and for ourselves. And I don't regret it. Not for a moment. The call that confirmed what I'd known was inevitable came on a gray, drizzly morning, the kind of day where the sky feels heavy with more than just weather. My aunt's voice was soft, resigned, carrying none of the urgency it had in our last conversation. "She's gone, Jessica," she said. "Your mother passed last night." I didn't cry. I didn't feel the rush of emotions I thought might come with that news. I didn't feel relief, or sorrow, or even anger. What I felt was something quieter. A stillness, as if a door that had been rattling in the wind for so long had finally blown shut, and now the house was silent again. The days that followed were strange, suspended in a kind of fog. I kept waiting for the grief to hit, for the weight of her absence to settle on my shoulders. I waited for the guilt to come crashing down, for regret to choke me. But it didn't. What I felt instead was a bittersweet kind of peace, the kind that comes not from the loss itself, but from knowing that, in the end, I stayed true to what I believed was right. The funeral was small. My aunt called to tell me when it would be, and I thanked her for letting me know. I didn't go. I couldn't. Not because I wanted to dishonor her memory, but because I knew being there would have meant reopening wounds I had worked so hard to heal. I sent flowers, a simple arrangement, no message, no grand gestures, just enough to acknowledge that, in the end, she was my mother, even if she had never truly been what a mother should be. Family dynamics shifted in ways I had both expected and not. Some relatives, those who had stood on the sidelines all those years, respected my choice. Quietly, gently, they reached out to say they understood, that they admired the strength it took to set boundaries and hold them. Others showed their true colors. The ones who had judged me before judged me harder now. The ones who had begged me to give her just one visit were quick to paint me as the cold, ungrateful daughter who denied a dying woman her final wish. I heard through the grapevine that certain cousins no longer wanted anything to do with me. That uncles and aunts shook their heads when my name came up, muttering about how I'd let the past poison the present. I let them go. I didn't fight for their understanding. I didn't try to explain. I'd spent too many years trying to make people see my truth, trying to justify my pain to those determined not to see it. I was done. Eric, as always, stood by me. He held me on the nights when the silence felt too loud, when the memories crept in uninvited. He reminded me, gently, that I hadn't done this out of cruelty, that my choice had been one of protection, not punishment. And watching him with our son, seeing the kind of father he is, the gentleness and patience and love he shows, only deepened my resolve that we had done the right thing. I won't pretend there weren't moments of doubt. In the quiet of the night, when the world was asleep and it was just me and my thoughts, I sometimes questioned myself. I'd think about the child I used to be, the little girl who would have given anything for a kind word, a warm hug, any sign at all that she was loved. I'd wonder if I had robbed my mother of a chance to be better at the end, if I had robbed myself of seeing that transformation. But then I would look at my son, at his innocent face, at the way he trusts so completely, so freely. I would think about the promise I made to him the day he was born, that I would protect him from the kind of pain I'd known. And I would remember why I did what I did. The lessons I've learned through all of this are etched deeply into me now. I've learned that boundaries are not walls built out of spite, they are fences we build to protect what is precious. I've learned that healing is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and slow, like the way a scar fades over time. I've learned that motherhood is not about perfection, but about intention, about choosing love, choosing protection, choosing kindness, even when it's hard. Perhaps the most important lesson is this. We do not owe access to ourselves or our children to those who have not earned it. Love is not an entitlement. Forgiveness is not a performance. And peace, true, deep, soul-deep peace, often comes at the cost of letting go of what others think we should do, and instead doing what we know in our hearts is right. I think about my mother sometimes. Not often, not with the sharp pain I once did, but in passing. I wonder if she meant the things she wrote in that letter, if she truly found any regret in those final days. I wonder if, in her own way, she loved me. I don't know. I don't think I ever will. And I'm learning to be okay with that. To anyone out there who finds themselves in a position like mine, torn between guilt and self-preservation, between the pressure of family and the pull of your own truth, I want you to know this. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to choose your peace. It's okay to choose the well-being of your children, even if the world tells you you're wrong. You don't owe anyone a performance of forgiveness. You don't owe anyone access to your heart, your home, your family, if they have proven they can't be trusted with it. Your boundaries are valid. Your choices are valid. And in the end, you are the one who has to live with the consequences. Not the people shouting from the sidelines. Not the relatives who think they know better. Where I am now is a place of hard-won peace. A place where the past no longer dictates my present, where the choices I make are guided by love, real love, the kind that nurtures and protects. I am not my mother's daughter in the ways that used to define me. I am my son's mother, and that is all the legacy I need. I don't know what my mother felt in her final moments. I don't know if she found the redemption she was seeking, or if she left this world still clinging to the story she told herself. What I do know is that I stayed true to myself, and that in the end is enough.